Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first anarchy analysis of the summer split. Today we're going to be breaking down each team in the LCS and giving an overall ranking for this split overall. But before we make it into any of the breakdown, we need to cover over the ground rules. Firstly, instead of it being a 1 to 10 system, we're cutting it down by a lot of numbers down to 1 to 5 because last split, let's be honest, I only used about 3 numbers overall to break down each team and each player, and as such it's easier just to go down to 5 numbers. As for the actual grading, we're doing 3 stats again this split. And these 3 stats have changed since last split. Now teamwork and mechanics have stayed the same. We've picked up a 3rd stat that's different. It's actually going to be spring split success. Now you're probably wondering, how am I going to base some players' spring split success considering they're either in Academy League or not in the LCS as a whole? Well, we're going to just talk about them and give them probably a 3 because that is just a base score overall. Anyway, enough rambling on, let's get into our first team. We start this video off with 100 Thieves. In top lane we got Sunday, in the jungle is Meteos, Riem takes up mid, Cody Sun and Stunt is your bot lane, and this team is actually really good. I love this team. It's unchanged from spring and it's very strong. Sunday is a phenomenal top lane and Meteos has such good credibility for a career so long in the LCS, probably one of the OGs of this league. Cody Sun, a phenomenal ADC and great to be in this league, and yeah, a very strong lineup to say the least. So let's get into the mechanical skill of these players, starting with Sunday. This guy is very mechanical in that top side map. He's got such a good ability to outplay turret dives on him, and is very good on champions that can bully lane, like Aatrox and Set. He's very good at controlling the lane with the mechanics of that champion, or them champions, and honestly he's very good with them and his mechanics are pretty clean. He knows where to TP, when to TP into fights, and where he should and shouldn't be. He very rarely gets caught out, to say the least, and if he does, he can outplay him quite easily. As for Meteos, he's a solid mechanical player. He's probably one of the better junglers in the league. He's got such a good career so far in the LCS, and he's shown such good mechanics back when he was on C9, and them mechanics have continued. The only thing that I would not rate him so highly on is his positioning. He does get caught out quite a bit, I guess is the best way to put it, and I did point it out in one of the series that I broke down of 100 Thieves this season. He was getting caught out quite a lot. As for Rioma, there's not much I can say about him. He's a solid player, so he just gets a solid 3. Cody Sun's mechanics, this is where we're going to see things change. He's a phenomenal player as an ADC. Last season he had a very good record in terms of deathless games, and that was purely down to his positioning and mechanical play on the ADCs he was playing. Yes, you can say the champions he was playing had quite a lot of range, but this season into spring split you've got champions like Aphelios and Senna joining the ranks. 2 very strong champions that made a huge impact at the start of the season, and Aphelios becoming probably the most predominant ADC in the league. It was pretty obvious that he was going to have a fun time on a very situational based champion depending on the guns, and he showed very strong mechanics, as I said, and so he's the first one to get a 5 for mechanics. Next up we have teamwork, and Sunday gets a perfect 5. As I alluded to before, he has such good mechanical skill. Of course he's going to be able to team fight well and join his team and cooperate very nicely into fights. He's usually there as the big frontline set him up for Cody-san, who we'll discuss in a few seconds why he's gotten that nice big juicy 5 as well as Meteos being another frontliner for this 100 Thieves team. They've got a very, very solid roster, to say the least, for back-to-front team fighting, and which is their kind of style, realistically. Now, Sunday obviously is great at this sort of play, and hence why he has a 5. Meteos, obviously, as I said, does get caught out and is kind of liable to you being punished quite heavily in team fights. He's usually the guy that will die first, or kind of lose out with his teamwork and not get his lanes ahead like his other lanes bar bot lane as a whole. Then we got Ryoma, again, just a solid player, you kind of have to just give him that score. Then we get to Cody-san. And Cody-san in team fights, he is the guy that will sweep everyone up and basically just clean the team fight up for 100 Thieves and get all the kills. So he gets the solid 5, and without support by the stump by his side, he wouldn't have that good of a look. And Stunt obviously gets the 4 for having solid play. Again, he's similar to Meteos in the fact that he will get caught out and be punished for it, and as such he gets put his team behind quite easily. So yeah, that's why he gets that as a score. Now we discuss their spring split success. They get a solid 3. They did very well in the regular split, finishing it in a solid 4th place, and getting into playoffs, well, they finished just outside 5th/6th. The reason is they lost to C9 3-0 and then to TSM 3-2, which they realistically should have won, honestly. But TSM snuck away the win there. And the 5th/6th placing, considering they finished 4th/3rd in the regular split, to then get knocked out first in the tournament, it's kind of bad, I guess is the best way to put it, considering they were a higher seed then losing to a lower seed. But yeah, they get a solid 3, which is a decent score considering how well they played this spring split. So let's move over to C9, starting in top lane Licorice, in the jungle is Blather, mid lane is Niski, ADC is Sven, and Vulcan is in support. Now this team are your reigning LCS Spring Split champions, and as a whole, expect quite high scores for them. So let's take a look at our mechanical scoring now. As you can see, 4s and 3s across the board. We'll start with Licorice. I've given 3 because he is kind of the victim to quite a lot of 2v1s, and he doesn't realistically outplay him that much as some of the other top laners. Blabber, I've given a 4 because he's obviously a very good jungler. Christ, he won the MVP of the Spring Split. He obviously does have that good mechanical outplaying skills, and is very, very strong. You then got Niski, I've given him a 3. He's only realistically used in this team as more of the roaming threat, which is why he's got a score that's higher. And then Sven and Vulcan both have 4 because Sven is a seriously good mechanical player. He has in finals before, when he was on TSM, kind of thrown a little, I guess is the best way to put it, but the last split he performed very well and didn't throw at all, and so I'm giving him strong mechanics. As for Vulcan, he's just very, very good mechanically. Obviously he knows who to target in dives, he knows where to execute onto, he's very, very strong in that termini thing. Moving over to the teamwork stat, we can see here 4s and 5s for this stat, and this is kind of the strength of C9, is their teamwork. Licorice is a top laner who sacrifices lane in order to get the rest of his team ahead. Similarly, that's how Niski plays. Niski benefits his other lanes He usually may head top to help Licorice get a bit of his own back when he's obviously being put behind in most of the games. And then Sven's gonna have 4, and so's Blabber having 4. They don't impact as much as what Niski tries to do, or Vulcan or Licorice, but they're kind of the players who obviously all still roam. Like, he's a jungler. Blabber will of course be roaming across the map and impacting lanes heavily. So yeah, you see these stats kind of obviously be quite high for this team that's built around teamwork as and cohesion more than any team in the league realistically. And finally, let's talk about Spring Split success. Kind of obvious, we're going to give C9 5 out of 5 because obviously they're the winners of the split. They deserve the highest score because of it, and as such they get it. Not much to explain here, they just get a perfect 5. Moving on to CLG, or Counter-Logic Gaming, we're going to start in the top lane with Ruin. In the jungle we've got Wiggly. Mid lane it's the notorious POB, Po Belter. ADC is Stixay, and support is Smoothie. Now overall this team underperformed in the Spring Split in comparison to their summer success last season. Will we see summer success this season? It's hard to tell with this team, but let's run down the overall stats. Let's discuss mechanics. Starting with Ruin, I've given him a solid 3. I mean, he's a top lane and you don't really need that much mechanical play in the top lane. You're on a solo island by yourself, you don't need skill. Wiggly, I've given a 4. He showed a lot of good prowess in his first season in the LCS last year. In spring, there were glimpses of his success, but not too much. POB is just a god mid laner. You kind of have to give him a high score of 4. Overall, he's performed phenomenally in his entire career, and the mechanics that he's able to pull out on certain champions kind of resurrected CLG a little at the end of the season. Split last year. And yeah, this should be a fairly interesting roster. Stixay, give him a 3. He's a solid player. He isn't the best ADC, I think, in the league. There's a lot of better players than him. He's probably the second class from top of my brain on ADCs at the moment. And then you've got Smoothie, who's a phenomenal support. He has great mechanics. Again, he'd done well with TSM a few seasons ago. He was able to play phenomenally well and has good mechanical play. And yeah, a very strong player. Now let's cover teamwork stat. We start with Ruin. Again, I've given him a 3. I can't say much on Ruin. He's just there. Wiggly, given a 5. He's very good in teamwork situations. He's got good synergy with his mid lane and also with Smoothie. We saw in the summer split last year, he was very, very strong. Po Belter, every team he's gone on, he's performed well with his team. He's always synergized well with whoever he's with, and he's honestly one of the best. Stixay, I'm giving a solid 4. He's had pop-off times with his team in team fights. He is there to sweep up and clean up in fights. He was playing Academy most of last year alongside the LCS, so it's quite interesting to say the least to see how his teamwork transitions between the two squads. As for Smoothie, again, given a 5. He's a solid team player. If we look at how TSM were with him on it, he was the defensive-y support, and he can transition that defensive sort of style onto CLG, and it actually worked quite well. And he does play very well protecting his team and playing around his team as a whole. And finally we'll talk about CLG's spring success. As a whole, it wasn't the best. They finished dead last after such high expectations on this roster coming into this spring split. You thought they'd finish in 4th, maybe 5th or 6th, at least make playoffs with the roster that did so well in summer last year, and well, they didn't. They underperformed massively, similar to how Team Liquid were, but yet it's kind of an underperformance by CLG in spring, so I'm interested to see how they do this actual summer. We are onto probably the team that's had the most changes that are very impactful in Dignitas. In that top lane we see Viper making his debut for this Dignitas team, Dardoch transitioning from TSM over to Dignitas in the jungle, mid lane still remains the same with Froggen, and Johnson and Afromoo are the bot lane duo that are very strong. Now this team, obviously, as I've said, have made 2 big changes in that top lane, losing Huni in that top lane and bringing in Dardoch to replace Grig/Acadian. Dignitas have made it kind of a habit then to bring in former TSM junglers, and yeah, it must be a very interesting setup that we're going to have fun breaking down for you guys right now. So let's begin with the mechanics of Dignitas. Now, Viper and Dardoch and Froggen all get a score of 4, and the reason is Viper is a very clinical player. He's similar to Broken Blade in terms of how he plays. He did falter towards the end of the season, and especially in playoffs for FlyQuest, and he was kind of subsequently benched for solo, but he is still a very mechanical player. Similarly with Dardoch, probably the most mechanical jungler in the league behind Broxah, I would say, and he's very good at his role. Froggen, yet again, is a very strong mechanical player. Mid lane, he's very good with Orianna. Control mage he picks Anivias, Victors, them sort of champions he's very good at, very strong mechanically on them. As for Johnson, this is his 2nd split in the LCS, and you can't really say he's that mechanically strong or that mechanically gifted, and as such I've only given him a 3. Same with Afromoo, he's a support, he's very strong, he's a good support, probably most OG support in the league at the moment. I think he is, but he's very good at his job. He's strong, he's a very good player, and realistically he doesn't need that good mechanics in order to perform. Moving over to the teamwork stat, we can see that 4 of the 5 players score 3 for me, and then 1 score 5, in which is Afromoo. Now you're probably wondering, why have I given Viper and Dardoch 3s? Because they did well on their respective teams in playoffs and played quite well. Well, Viper towards the end of the split kind of fell out of it with his team and didn't perform, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of the fact that he wasn't working well with the team, he wasn't synergizing well, and kind of fell flat on his face towards the end. But he does pose quite well with his team at the start of this season. Obviously them reaching playoffs was partly down to him, and did very well. Dardoch, again, didn't click in my opinion with his top lane and mid lane, and had quite a few failed ganks, and the setup he did for him wasn't the best, I would say. He kind of more predominantly went towards the top and mid lanes. There was no real help of his bot lane of Kobe and Biofrost. They were kind of just left on an island by themselves, and if you watch most of the season back, I don't think there were many ganks towards the bot lane. That being said, he was TSM's First Blood King, and I think he had the highest amount of First Bloods in the LCS last season and split, because he played quite well and did gank decently, so we have to give him 3. Froggen and Johnson. Froggen is the teamwork guy. He's kind of the glue for this team, but going into this season with 2 new players coming into the squad, it's kind of hard to obviously say they're going to perform well as a team, and the synergy is going to be a bit off, and as such I've kind of had to give him a lower score, to say the least, based off that. As for Aframu, he's probably the king support. He deserves to get that nice juicy 5 for his support play and his teamwork in fights, even if he is probably coming to the latter stages of his career in the LCS. So yeah, that is why I've given them this sort of result in terms of their teamwork. So we've got Spring Split success to cover here, and well, a lot of these are going to be a bit questionable. Starting with Viper, let's start in the top lane. Now, what you may notice is I gave Viper a 3 here for his Spring success, and you're probably wondering why when I gave, well, I'm going to give all of FlyQuest 4s for finishing 2nd in the league in playoffs. Well, in playoffs, he didn't play barely any games. He played 1 or 2, and even then he got benched for the rest of them and kind of didn't do much, to say the least, towards the off-season. That being said, he did play the entirety of the Spring Split up until playoffs, meaning qualification for FlyQuest into playoffs he was a key part of, so obviously he deserves at least a 3. Dardoch, yet again, played on TSM. He got a 3, same as what I'm going to give all of TSM. Froggen, Johnson and Aframu all get 3s, and you're probably wondering why when they didn't play in playoffs. Well, here's the thing. They lost out on playoffs by 1 game, and it was a tiebreaker against the team that did make it into playoffs. So you can't exactly say, here, you get that, when they won a game before they faced Golden Guardians, who we'll cover in a second, and they won a lot of games to get into this position. They were like sat in 2nd for the majority of the season, and it was fairly hard to beat them until they faced TSM, who demolished them. But yeah, this team played quite well in Spring overall, and I think they're going to perform quite well in Summer. Only time will tell as we move over to our next team. Moving on to our next team in the league, we have Evil Geniuses in the top lane. We see Huni, Svenskeren in the jungle, Jizuke in mid, Bang in the bot lane with Zazel in support. This is a very, very strong team who finished 2nd overall via tiebreakers in the regular season, and overall performed very, very well in the regular season as a whole. It wasn't until playoffs we saw a bit of a falter in this team's performance, but this is a strong team to say the least, and with the introduction of Huni instead of Kumo in the top lane, this could be a very, very formidable team this split. So let's cover the mechanics of Evil Geniuses. Now, as you can see, Svenskeren gets a nice big juicy 5. Huni, he's not that mechanical. He's one of them guys that like to just isolate himself on the top side of the map and just play by himself. He has a lot of isolated deaths and really doesn't play towards a team, so you'll probably see a similar score for his teamwork stat. Sven gets a 5 because he's that good. He's very good at playing mechanically. He's a good Lee Sin. He's a great Kindred. He plays them sort of champions to a T, and with Sejuani, he's even better. He's probably the best Sej in the league. Jizuke, again, he's a good mechanical player, don't get me wrong. He isn't the same levels of mid laner as Jensen or Bjergsen, but he's, again, a guy that gets caught out, and the changes to this Evil Geniuses team is they've got rid of people who play towards a team and got people that die isolated a lot more. In Huni and Jizuke, they both are very good at isolated deaths, So it's going to be interesting to see how they perform as a team. And yeah, overall it's a very nice dynamic. So we've got our nice little teamwork stat to cover here. Again, Hooney gets a nice jolly old 3. Reason being is he is the guy that will die isolated a lot, plays to himself more than most top laners do instead of playing towards a team. So then again, giving him a 5, he's a top tier jungler in the league. He's phenomenal at what he does, and he does deserve that nice 5 for teamwork, because in the 2 teams that he's been on in CN9 and Evil Geniuses the past 2 seasons, he's performed well and worked well with the team. He's played for the team very nicely and won them the 2nd place or the 1st place or whatever they finish. He's done it for his team. Zuke, again, is a mid laner who plays for the team rather than himself. Yes, he can get these insane outplays here and there, but he does play towards the team more than anything and is very good at that job. Similar with Bang, he's not the most explosive ADC in the league since he's come here, but he's still done a decent job and he is very good at his role. Similarly to how his support player in Zazel is, he's a very, very good support. He plays for the team and he's a defensively kind of, what's the word? A defensively minded bot support. So yeah, he's good at protecting and giving his team an advantage through his setup of plays and protection. And finally, let's discuss the spring split success of each of these players. Starting with Hooney, giving him a solid 3, same as all the Ding tasks really. They get the 3, they lost out on playoffs by 1 match after winning the first of their tiebreakers. Losing out to Golden Guardians is kind of hard, but you know, you kind of have to expect it. Then you've got 4 for all of Evil Geniuses that played for EG last split. Reason being, they finished 2nd overall via tiebreakers in the LCS Spring League system, and then when it came to playoffs they finished in 3rd, which is still very strong. Yes, they did lose out to C9 and then to FlyQuest, but it was a very, very close set of matches with FlyQuest that could have gone either way, but it wasn't till FlyQuest just stepped it up a notch and absolutely demolished them. We saw Evil Geniuses just get absolutely killed off and put into 3rd place. Whether they would have beat TSM if they faced off against them, it was hard to tell considering FlyQuest were on such a good streak at the time and TSM got knocked out by them. It's kind of weird to see how it would have played out, but you know, it was a very, very good run for Evil Geniuses and I can see them doing very well in the regular split again and then suffering in playoffs when it becomes best of 5s, because their team isn't realistically known for best of 5 series when you've got players like Hooney who people just adapt to over the best of 5s. So it's going to be an interesting season, I feel, for the Evil Geniuses. We now move over to the Spring Split. Runners-up in playoffs in FlyQuest. In the top lane, it's Solo. Santorin joins him in the jungle. PoE in mid. Wild Turtle in the ADC/bot role. And Ignar on support. Now this team had a phenomenal Spring Split, and it kind of took a lot of people by surprise how well they actually performed. Yes, they did have Viper for the predominant of most of the spring regular season, and then only in playoffs Solo got drafted in and essentially brought in as this kind of safe hands. He's a very strong top laner. I've always rated him, and yet he's shown up and is made into the FlyQuest starting lineup for Summer. Now let's run down the mechanical stats of these players, which should be an interesting rundown. We move over to the mechanics as I stated. Starting with Solo, I'm giving him a solid 4. He's a very solid player in that top lane. Obviously he has mechanics to will quite a lot of champions in the top lane, and them mechanics do link into his positioning. He's always good in team fights, he always knows where to be. He's usually one of the first people into a fight and has got such good capability to clean up a team fight with ease that we saw in the TSM series. He was able to just clean up kills here and there in a team fight on Aatrox and champions like that, and absolutely overperformed. Santorin again is a good guy. He's obviously had a stint on TSM himself, and his mechanics haven't faltered at all since them days. He's always been a solid performer, and the only thing that I wouldn't say is he isn't the cleanest of junglers and he isn't the most mechanically gifted, but he's able to do his job well and just fulfill what he needs to. He gets by. He's similar to how Kobe is in the LEC and him being Mr. Consistent. Santorin's probably the most consistent jungler in the league, and we see that on a daily basis. PoE, we'll move over to him now. He's just a mechanical god as a mid laner. He's very, very good at his job. He's very strong. And same with Wild Turtle. Wild Turtle, his positioning in fights sometimes can be the death of him. Mostly because he likes to just dive straight into fights as and when, and obviously just fight. So you've kind of got to worry about him mechanically, but most of the time when he does that, it usually means he can see kills, and it's just how his playstyle is. Similarly with Ignar has some of the best mechanics in the league. He plays hook champions quite well. He plays Rakan. He's very, very strong at it and has such good mechanics on the champion that it allowed FlyQuest to demolish TSM in playoffs, which is sort of why we have FlyQuest as our runners-up this split. So yeah, a very, very strong mechanical team this is. Now let's discuss teamwork here for FlyQuest. Now, I've given Solo a nice solid 5 because he stepped up. He was brought into this team in the spring, in the playoffs, as a coach prior to this, and then was just dragged into this top lane role, coming back, and he came back strong, and he helped this team do so much. He was kind of the catalyst to add to FlyQuest's burning fire. He just made it go even higher, and it kind of helped the team's cohesion and improved them very drastically, I guess is the best way to put it, because he allowed the team to get ahead. He just stayed solid in his top lane. He performed very, very well, and honestly is a very, very solid top laner. As for Santorin, again, gotta give him a 4. He has good connections with Wild Turtle because he's played with him for so many years, and there's a good connection between them two. Similarly, his connection with Ignar, them two just are able to work so well together in terms of setting up ganks and also helping the other lanes out drastically is why they have such high teamwork skill, in my opinion. PoE and Wild Turtle, again, as I said, Wild Turtle is kind of the cleaner as well as the initiator on fights, which is kind of weird to say for an ADC, but he does do a lot for his team. He's the guy that will get the other lanes ahead if he's kind of being put behind because he's doing these insane plays. And similarly with Power Evil, he's a constant carry to help the team excel through the late game. He doesn't overextend to force a play, he kind of just hangs back to keep his team safe, to allow them to scale to late game where they can absolutely dominate fights and win the game that way. But yeah, this team has such good teamwork cohesion. I think this is going to be a hard team to stop in Summer. And finally we have Spring Split success. Now, as you can see, they're all getting 4s because they did finish second overall in the playoffs and finished in third, I believe, in the regular split. And as a whole, they performed very, very well. The only reason Solo doesn't have the 4 like everyone else is because he only played in the playoffs, and even then, he still finished in a solid second place with the team in the playoffs, and then missed out on 18 games in the regular split. But you know, he coached them, so he still gets the 3 there. And yeah, this was a very, very solid team in spring. I wonder if it will continue into summer. We now get into a team that overperformed in the spring split. In Golden Guardians, in the top lane, we've got Haunter. Jungle sees closer returning to the role. Golden Glue in the middle lane. FBI and Huni in that bot lane together. Now, this team, as I said, did overperform into my predictions for last split. I figured these would be dead last or just in 9th. However, they got into the playoffs. Granted, they went out first round. It was a very good matchup, though, to get in there via tiebreakers, so obviously that's going to implement, well, say their spring split success score is going to be a bit iffy here, let's say. But yeah, let's go over the mechanical score for these players. So we start in with Haunter. Now, he's the only one getting a 4 for the Golden Guardians because he has had such good mechanical success when he was on TSM, and moving over to Golden Guardians, it kind of carried over with him. He's got great control in the top lane. I remember recently seeing him on Ornn being able to set up such good executions in team fights for his team to work on. He's also really good at playing top dives on him, as well as diving in on oppositions in the top lane. He was predominantly very good at that with TSM, and it kind of continued over to Golden Guardians with Closer working very well with him. As for the rest of the team, I've given them a 3. I mean, they're solid players. I was tempted to give Golden Glue a 4 for mechanics because he has got some good skills on certain champions. I remember him bringing out a Predator Malzahar against TSM and absolutely dominating them when it was C9 versus TSM, when he was the sub mid laner for them. It was a very strong setup, I feel, but the rest of the team has to go with a 3. I was tempted to give them 2s because they're not too mechanically gifted. Huhi's a mid laner turned support, so you don't expect him to have that much like skill, but he hangs in there. And with Keith, who was the ADC turned support, it's kind of a bit weird to see this team actually do so well. Moving on to teamwork, we have a fairly interesting point, to say the least, because Haunter gets a 4, FBI gets a 4, and the reason being is them two are very good at playing for the team. Golden Glue as well, I was again thinking of giving them a 4, but the teamwork from these players is so good. As I said before, Haunter works so well setting up the team in team fights that obviously it allows FBI to obviously clean up. And Huhi, I feel that scoring I've given him will improve as the season goes on, where he gets more used to this support role. But that being said, he is known for being a mid laner that turned support, so it's kind of hard to say what will actually happen. Now let's talk about their spring split success. This team did make it into playoffs. They went out first round in the lower bracket, but they still made it. And yes, it was via tiebreaker shenanigans. They still have to get 3 points. The same as what we've given every team that were in the tiebreaker scenario. And the team above them, who did slightly better in 4th, get the same score. It's still hard for me to believe that this team performed so well. It was an overachievement, I feel, because it was a very underrated lineup, but considering the players that are on it, like Haunter and Golden Glue, even Huhi, are all players that have played in them finals games. They're all top tier players, and honestly, it amazed me to actually see this success. Let's move on to our next team though. Now we have Immortals Gaming here to cover. In the top lane we've got Soaz. Jungle is going to be Xmithy. Ika in mid. Altec on the bot lane with his support Hakuo. Now this team does technically have a secondary bot laner, but we'll be covering Altec for this. And this team finished just outside of playoffs, and this team did look like they would have made playoffs at the start of the season, with Soaz coming over to America, Xmithy, the former top jungler for Team Liquid, the back-to-back champions of the LCS. Ika being a hotshot new rookie. Altec is a great ADC, and Hakuo probably one of the most underrated supports in the league. But yeah, this team, it's quite stacked. It's time to actually break down their mechanical stats and all that jazz. So let's discuss the mechanics of these players. We'll start with Soaz in the top lane. The reason I give him a 4, he's won the LEC, well, the EU LCS back when he was in it multiple times with Fnatic, and he was very dominant on that Fnatic roster, and he was very hard to execute ganks onto. He was very mechanically gifted in that top lane. As for the rest of the team, I've given him a 3, bar Hakuo, because he's a very flawless support. He gets a 4, he does it very well, he's able to pair up nicely with his team, and has such good fluidity as a support player. Jumping over now to teamwork, we see pretty much the exact same mirror of the last set of stats, with Soaz getting 4, Hakuo getting 4. Reason being, Hakuo, one of the people that he could be laning with that is either Altec or Apollo, he's had a long tenure with that guy in a very strong synergy of a bot lane that was broken up this season, which is the first time it ever has been, and it's a surprise. But he gets 4 because he has such good synergy with a lot of these players, because he's able to set up so much for them. Similarly with Soaz, he's fitted in quite easily, along with Ika, who are both French. They've managed to transition over from EU very easily, and have actually done quite well with this Immortals lineup as a whole. And as such, this roster has worked quite well together. And you're probably wondering, why haven't I given Xmithy a 4 or a 5? I just feel that he's coming towards the end of his career. He's one of them players that might not show up every game, and he could honestly not work well with the team as he had did in spring. So I've kind of given him a 3 for that as a whole. And finally, let's discuss this team's spring split success. Now, they narrowly missed out on playoffs, losing the first tiebreaker to Dignitas, whom, in realistic fashion, it was a close game. Now, this team did do very well. Obviously, they tied 8 and 10, which is just below the average needed to get into playoffs. And it was very, very strong, this lineup, beating out TSM and teams alike that were secured for playoffs. And this roster is just quite good. You've got Ika, who is a young rookie this split, who's actually performed well with veterans in the likes of Xmithy and Soaz, and then you've got Altec and Hakuo, kind of mid-career-ish, and are doing well. It's amazing to see this roster perform, and I feel that they could be a surprise factor coming into this summer split. So let's get into the 2019 Spring and Summer Split Champions Team Liquid. In the top lane, it's going to be Impact. In the jungle, it's going to be Broxah. Jensen takes up mid lane. Tactical replaces Doublelift in the ADC role, and his support, CoreJJ, follows him up. Now obviously Team Liquid have lost probably one of their biggest star names in Doublelift, but obviously with Broxah actually going to be starting this split when he doesn't have to worry about visa issues or travelling to the US, especially in the current COVID situation. It's a nice sort of team lineup and hopefully should be performing this split. Whether or not we see it, it's kind of a hard thing to predict considering how bad their spring split actually was. But anyway, let's go over the stats for Team Liquid here, starting with their mechanical skills. So let's cover their mechanical scores, starting with Impact. Giving him a 3, he is not a top laner that's known for mechanics, he's known more for his teamwork as a whole. As such, he only gets a 3. Broxah is just a god mechanical player. You look at his Lee Sin that he can play, you look at them sort of champions, the Gragas's, the champions that require you to land skill shots. He is phenomenal at them and just is very clean as and when he gets these champions. So he gets a perfect 5. Jensen is sort of not the best mechanical player, not the worst, obviously. You look at his mid lane matchups into Bjergsen, and he does trade 1v1s with him quite well, and the mechanics of Jensen, it depends, because in the regular split in the LCS and that, he'll play very well. When it gets to Worlds time, he's one of the underperformers in a team, I'd say. Like, you look at Worlds when he was back on C9, playing LeBlanc, he didn't perform too well. Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer to give them this score. Tactical, again, it's just a standard 3. You expect the ADC to have mechanics, but when their mechanics get tested in the LCS, it's kind of hard to say he's going to show up as well as the rest of the team when he's unproven in a full season, or a split to say the least, and he's been in the LCS Academy League. It's not the same. And then you've got CoreJJ, probably the second most mechanical player. He's a very, very strong support. He's probably the second best, maybe the top, but possibly the third best support in the LCS. I'm tying him into a player that we've covered in Ignar, whom I don't know, it's either CoreJJ or Ignar takes second, behind Vulcan this split. Anyway, that's the mechanics. Let's get into the teamwork. So we look at Impact, yet again getting a 3. He's a solid top laner again. He is most known for his teamwork, but it isn't the same level as Broxah. Broxah is a god support in the jungle. He has such good synergies with his mid laners usually. You look at back on Fnatic when he was paired with Caps, he was phenomenal roaming around setting up ganks for Caps and getting Caps ahead, and then Caps was able to carry the game into the late stages of the game, and even with Nemesis he played that well. We saw glimpses of this with Jensen, whom I've also given a 3 because they have good synergy in that sort of realm of things, and it was looking okay in the earlier parts of the season when they joined together. Now Tactical, again, I have to give a 3. It's still not the same level as what it is in the LCS, and yes, he did play a few games in the LCS, but you can't just base it off that. He's still a strong player. And then Core JJ, you have to give him top score because his support, he plays very well. He is known for these sort of Braum, Rakans, even Thrashers to come out and be played for him, and yeah, overall it's a fairly solid Team Liquid. And lastly, let's talk about Spring Split success. Now, Team Liquid as a whole didn't do too well, to say the least. They finished outside of the playoff places in 7th or 8th, and yeah, it wasn't very strong. Now you'll notice Tactical was given a 3 because the Academy roster for Team Liquid actually finished in a reasonable position in playoffs. They finished 6th in the regular split and 5th/6th in playoffs, which is overall very strong, I guess, considering the rosters that were in Academy. Academy was pretty much C9 or Dignitas winning it because of who they had, and as a whole it was a very, very interesting route these teams played. So Tactical finishing 6th is a very good thing for him, so he obviously gets 3 for obviously making it into a playoffs. And now it's time for our final team, which is Team Solar Mid. In the top lane we got Broken Blade, jungle is Speaker, mid lane's Bjergsen, ADC is Doublelift, and on the support role it's Biofrost. Now this TSM roster has had some controversial changes in terms of how they've got rid of players as well as brought in players like Doublelift, but this roster is here to stay for the summer split and it is quite stacked to say the least. Now obviously we need to discuss each player's actual rankings here and we'll get into that right now. So let's talk mechanics. Starting in the top lane, Broken Blade, I've given a solid 4. Obviously he's a very strong player on Aurelia and Akali and he has good mechanics on them. Speaker, given a 3, obviously can't really give him that high of a score because he was in Academy, not playing on the professional stage in terms of the fact that you're playing against the top level opponents. Bjergsen, I've given 5 because obviously it's Bjergsen. He's a mechanical god. You give him Syndra, you give him Zed, you give him Akali, you give him Aurelia, he pops off and will perform in any situation. Similarly with how Doublelift plays with his ADCs, if you give him these sorts of champions he'll perform very well, and as such he's got a 4. And then Biofrost, you're a support, you don't really need that much mechanical skill, so you realistically only going to have about a 3. Next we have teamwork. Obviously top lane synergy with jungle last split was quite bad for TSM, so we're going to give him a 3 just because because it did work well sometime but didn't work well quite a bit of the other time, and as such it's only 3 there. Bjergsen gets a 4, he's solid playing with the team, he can sacrifice lane, he did that in the FlyQuest series where he was playing Zillion and champions along those lines where he was sacrificing his sort of lane bully dominance, being the 1v1 king for getting his team ahead, so we've got that. Biofrost, I've given a 5 because he's a very solid team player. He picks for the team very nicely in terms of his picks. He is an aggressive support, so you'll be seeing things like maybe a Pyke or Nautilus or champs along those lines that are aggressive, but he does set up quite a lot of picks. I look back to TSM vs Echo Fox in playoffs a few years ago. He played Pyke with Doublelift as his ADC as well, and it was essentially just a pick lane where they just went off and absolutely dominated Echo Fox because they were getting pick after pick after pick. And I remember this match because I was on holiday at the time and I was like, oh, I can't watch this, I'm gonna not be able to wake up in the morning and go to the beach and have fun. I instead was watching TSM win. But anyway, that is my thing. Double Lift I've given a solid score because he plays quite well. He is, though, known for being able to outplay one of the X's very nicely, and it's sort of why I've not given him as good of a score as Biofrost, to say the least. But yeah, they're very, very solid scores, to say the least. And lastly, let's take a look at our spring split success for TSM last year. Now, two players have got a fairly different sort of experience to what Broken Blade Bjergsen and Biofrost experienced, but the triple Bs basically got 4th/5th placing in the actual summer split playoffs, and could have had a possibility of 2nd, so they only get 3 because it's not top 3 or top 2 for the 4 points, so they only get a solid 3 overall. And Speaker in the Academy League finished roughly the same with TSM, losing out to Cloud9 in playoffs, but they finished at 3-1, but you know, it was still a very hard series for them, and yeah, Speaker only gets 3. As for Double Lift, TSM's new ADC, well, old ADC returning, Team Liquid didn't do too well in the spring split as a whole. They underachieved with the kind of pedigree that roster had. Broxer in jungle, who played half the games that he was meant to play. You then had Impact in top lane, a phenomenal top laner who has won Worlds, I do believe, with SKT. You then have Jensen, the Golden Boy in NA, behind Bjergsen, and then you have Double Lift and Core JJ, a phenomenal bot lane, probably the best bot lane in America, who underperformed in spring. So yeah, he's gonna get a 2. I was contemplating a 1 overall, but he got lucky and secured a 2 because he still performed quite well until he was benched. So now it's time to actually break down where I feel each team are going to finish. After running through all these players, let's go over each team, starting with the team that I feel are going to finish in 10th. Now, this team made it into playoffs this spring split, but I feel they're going to finish dead last in 10th, which is going to be the Golden Guardians. Yes, that's right, folks. This team, honestly, haven't performed well, in my opinion, or well enough to actually warrant the playoff place they got. I felt that teams like Dignitas or Immortals should have got that 6th spot in the playoffs, but you know, they still did very, very well, and I feel that Summer, with the players and the rosters all switching up and them realistically not making any big changes to their roster, it's kind of hard to actually say how well they'll do, but I feel they'll pick up some surprise wins here or there, and there is a few teams that I feel they will beat that are in this lineup, but whether or not we see it, it's hard to believe. In 9, we have a team that I had high hopes for coming into spring, Encounter Logic Gaming. Yeah, I figured this team would do well in spring, but with the success they had being very limited, I don't think they're going to do this well in summer. With the roster they've got, it's very similar to what it was back then, and right now it's still not good at all. It's pretty bad in terms of what it is, and yeah, they did start picking up wins when POB joined, but it's still a roster that I feel is destined to fail after such a poor spring split. In at number 8, we're gonna see Dignitas put here. This team, honestly, is quite a strong stacked lineup in terms of the players that they've got on it, but in my opinion, I don't think they'll make playoffs like they did in spring. They failed to qualify there. I think that this team's going to narrowly miss out on a top 6, but with the changes to summer, having the top 8 make playoffs and 7 and 8 are in the lower bracket, while the top 6 are in the upper bracket, it's kind of interesting to see how this new format will work, and teams will be looking forward to getting 7th or 8th. And I just feel this is going to be one of those teams that finish in this position. In at 7, we have 100 Thieves. Now this team has got some veterans in it, like Meteos and someday to the LCS, who are very, very dominant players, and this team you would expect to actually finish quite high, but with the rosters that are above them and the spring split success of these rosters, you've just got to feel they're coming in 7th overall. And there may be a tiebreaker situation with the team that I've got above them in 6th and 5th. But overall, I feel this team are quite strong. They should be in the playoffs at least. And I just feel that the overall consistency of this team does tend to lack from time to time. And at 6, we have a team that did finish below 100 Thieves last split in Immortals. And the reason I put them higher this split is because I feel the team, honestly, in the off-season has improved probably considerably more than what people expect. Yes, you've got a strong veteran lineup, and the skill that these players bring is unmatchable. But 100 Thieves will have had the same, and I feel it's going to be close between the two teams, coming down to a tiebreaker. But I feel in the tiebreaker, Immortals will win it and advance into the upper bracket of the playoffs. And as a whole, this could be quite an interesting set of matches for 5th, 6th and 7th, in my opinion. In at number 5, we have the team that finished 2nd in playoffs, FlyQuest. And you're probably wondering why they're sat in 5th. Well, I'll be honest, I don't think that they're going to have that good of a run like they did in spring. I just feel that the teams that are above them have gotten better. They look a lot better in terms of how they've structured themselves, and I feel it should be far easier for these teams to just crush FlyQuest, considering they've just changed a lot, whereas FlyQuest have stayed the same since their playoff run, and that might be what crucifies them realistically, because no change is not good. In at 4, we have Evil Geniuses, the team that finished 3rd in the playoffs and 2nd overall. I feel are actually gonna finish in 4th. Reason being, they signed Huni as their new starting top laner for Kumo, which is kind of a side grade in my opinion, even if Huni has got so much experience as a world's champion. I feel though that Huni is past his best in my opinion, and Kumo is younger and obviously has grinded a lot harder and worked very well in this Evil Geniuses lineup. But yeah, you can say Huni is a god top laner, which is fine. It's still why I see him as a top 4 place team, and honestly it's going to be interesting to see how this team overall performs, because I don't realistically know how the changes are going to work with the teams I've got above them, honestly. In at 3, we have TSM, the team that have brought back Doublelift and replaced their spring split probably best jungler in in a couple of seasons now in Dardoch, and bringing in Doublelift for Kobe. It's honestly, TSM have had a lot of success with Doublelift on the roster in the past, but it's still worrying to see that they're having to bring him in after a poor spring split that he had. It's worrying that maybe that rot of form that he was in is gonna happen again. Whether or not it does, it's kind of hard to tell. Who knows? Maybe he'll perform. It's still, though, a very strong lineup. Yes, Speaker has been brought in to the starting roster, but he is a phenomenal jungler. He performs very well for TSM. He played in playoffs for them last season, I do believe. Yes, they did lose the game that he played, but, and this is a huge but, he still stole away Baron. He has got some nerves on him. He's able to cope with stage pressure, especially in playoffs, and he performed very well. He's going in with Broken Blade, who I believe to be that they have got a good synergy together in comparison to other junglers with TSM. There's a good connection to the top lane, where in the past 2 seasons they've honestly been trying to focus towards getting Broken Blade ahead, with the jungle collapsing to make 2v1s. But obviously there's been a lot of miscommunication / bad timing on these executions, I guess is the best way to put it. And yeah, they've kind of struggled, so maybe this will be the jungle top synergy they need in order to actually succeed. Now, the team that I've got in second is a team that realistically should have been at least top 2 in spring, but ended up in 9th. It's Team Liquid. Yes, they've got rid of probably their star name in Doublelift for their Academy ADC, but you have to realise the rest of the team is full of stars as well. Impact is probably the second best top laner in the league. Core JJ is probably the best, or if not the second best top, support in the league. You've then got Jensen, undoubtedly the second best mid laner in the league. And then in the jungle, you've got this EU star who was the best jungler in EU, or the second best in EU, behind Yankos, coming over to NA and not having that good of a showing. It's kind of hard to actually predict whether or not this team will perform to the standard of player that they've got on their team, or flop like they did in spring. That being said, the flop could be down to many reasons, and there is a lot of controversy behind some of the players that were playing, and whether or not there were other team issues. But this team should perform. You'd expect with the quality of players to perform, and that's why I've got them up in second. And finally, my number 1 team. Is it hard to expect that I've got C9 in first after such a dominant spring? This team only dropped 1 game in a regular split to TSM, and that was weird because TSM realistically shouldn't have beat them, even if they were close twice, and they won one of them, lol. But it's still amazing to see this team do so well in spring, that you can definitely see the fact that they're going to do well in summer, because there's been no changes to the roster. The roster that have changed aren't too drastic of changes. Like, yeah, you can say Doublelift coming into TSM was big if they kept Dardoch, because Dardoch was quite a key player for TSM, but bringing in Speaker, it's kind of a they brought in Doublelift because there's clearly some issues. But you then look at Team Liquid, not too big of a change bar Doublelift leaving. You've then got EG, who've made a change in their top lane, getting rid of an academy rated top laner for a LCS caliber top laner who's won world championships in Korea. Fly, they've brought in their coach who performed phenomenally in playoffs, but yeah, there isn't too much of a drastic change with all the teams that have made changes. And C9 is probably the only team that I've got that hasn't made a change and is yet in first, and the other teams that haven't made a change, like Golden Guardians, IMT and 100 Thieves, are all rated lower. They're around the bottom of the leaderboard because the rosters, I just don't feel, are up to the standards as what C9 has. I've always rated the roster that C9 have with Vulcan. Vulcan, coming from Clutch Gaming, who made it to Worlds and performed phenomenally, getting to the quarters, I do believe. But the Vulcan is a phenomenal support. I'd probably rate him as the best, if not the second best support in the LCS. You've then got Sven, who had a rocky sort of time on TSM, being able to showcase his strengths on the C9 roster and absolutely perform like a madman. Niski is just being a madman because it suits his playstyle, the roam, sacrifice lane, mid lane sort of playstyle to get your other lanes ahead is sort of the big meta at the moment. Then you have in your jungle your sub jungler in Blabber, who became an MVP for a split. That tells you how good of a player he is, and he was your sub. That tells you that the player you had before you must have been better, obviously, and he did win MVP in the split that he played for C9. You know, just saying, C9 have a good thing with their junglers, and Sven Skeren and Blabber, both are phenomenal junglers. And as such, when Blabber took over, it was fairly obvious to see that he was going to shine. And when you come to Licorice, he's probably the best young NA talent in the world. He's the best top laner in the league, by far. And so, it's no surprise to see C9 probably top the league again. As for playoffs, I feel C9 are going to win it. I still think that it's going to be close between the rest of the 7 teams that are going into playoffs bar C9. It could go anyway, honestly. And nearer the time when we know what teams are in playoffs, I'll make a proper prediction. But my outside guess on runners-up will be Evil Geniuses. Why not? I think that they're going to succeed quite well in the lower bracket. And it's going to come down to C9, TL in one matchup, TSM and Fly in another. EG's already going to be in the lower bracket, so we'll probably see them fight it out. Probably see EG beat the rest of the lower bracket teams and get to the lower bracket final and then win that and then lose to C9 in the final. That's my prediction. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe when you're out there if you want to, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.